Welcome to In Conversation with MANWAR podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the Do Not Be a Bystander campaign. You can join us in raising awareness about bullying by visiting the donotbeabystander.com, and be sure to subscribe to the channel to stay informed about upcoming episodes. Today's participants are Arif and Barira. Our special guests for today's episode is Trevor Fairweather and April St. Martin.
Welcome to our Bullying Awareness Podcast. I'm your host, Manwar Khan. Today, I'm joined by two young individuals who are ready to share their thoughts and insights on the topic of respect. Respect is all about treating others the way we would like to be treated. It is a basic and essential value that reminds us to be kind, considerate, and understanding towards everyone around us. When we show respect, we show that we care about that person's feelings, thoughts, and rights. Today's participants are Arif and Barira. Welcome to our show, Arif and Barira. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
All right. So before we continue, I would like to introduce our special guests for today's podcast, Trevor Fairweather and April St. Martin. They both will be shedding some lights on the topic, today's topic, respect, and give you guys tips and advice and any insights for our viewers. I would talk a little bit about Trevor. Who is Trevor? Trevor is a program director with extensive experience in managing complex software and hardware projects. A result-oriented individual who possesses strong public policy abilities through effective communication, team collaboration, and management of resources. Thank you, Trevor, for joining us today. Our next guest is April St. Martin. April, she was born and raised in Edmonton. She enjoys personal development and lives within purpose, intention, and integrity. April loves spending time with friends and family and love music. She believes in self-love and personal growth and spirituality. Thank you so much, April, for joining us today. Now that we have introduced our participants and guests, let's get started with the question. My first question is for, can you guess for who? Arif, right? All right. Respect is essential in our interaction with others for several compelling reasons. My first question for you is, how would you define respect? Why do you think respect is important in our interaction with others?
Yeah, thank you for that. To me, respect is mostly when you can have a difference of opinion and still be okay with it. I can recall days of school when we would have some debates, like controlled environment, but still the essence of debates would be that we can have our viewpoints, you can have yours, and we could go head to head. At that point, maybe has a better point, the other doesn't, and afterwards we're still okay and we are still friends, rather than me like pushing my views on you. I respect what you think of it, and if you come to terms with what I had to say in your own manner, then you have shown respect to me, or to this conversation we had, and I was able to add something to you, and it could go vice versa. um, what happens is, I remember, like, in sometimes you just don't want to hear the other person out when you're thinking about only your opinion, and you think you just don't give. So that's a very disrespectful thing, to just think that you're maybe always right, or your opinion has a higher value and the other person doesn't. So in my opinion, when you are okay having difference of opinions, that is like a really good way of showing respect and interacting.
Right. Great answer. Now that you brought that topic, disrespect. So disrespecting others can have significant and negative consequence. So my question for Barira is, what are some consequences of disrespecting others? How can we handle this disagreement or conflicts in a respectful manner?
Right. So disrespecting others can have quite a few consequences. For example, without elaborating into much, if I disrespect with a friend or to a friend who is basically an equivalent, it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody above us. If you are disrespecting them by belittling her in front of other people that she is more shy with, for example, that would be disrespecting her as well, and it could effectively hamper our friendship that we have had for a very long period of time. For example, if I disrespected her by saying something sensitive about her family that I was only aware of, or some difference in opinion that she was just trying to preach to others, be it her mentality or anything that she's trying to tell other people, but I just kind of dismissive of her entire behavior, that would be a way, or some in a way disrespecting her as well. And of course there is the part where we disrespect elders. So either way, we're hampering our relationship with them, be it friendship, be it family wise, or be it job wise. It's always a negative impact or impression to have that this person is disrespectful. And in a way, if you disrespect, which also consequently comes to the next point, that how can we handle disrespect better? Well, first of all, if you disrespect to begin with, there's nobody will allow you to handle a disrespectful situation, because as a result of disrespecting all the time, you become someone who always disrespects other people from a time to time basis. So you can't, as a consequently, you can't even resolve any other disrespect. Now, to avoid, having said that, if a normal person tries to resolve some kind of a problem or disagreement without being disrespectful, what they can do is, two people who are having a meaningless argument over anything, that could be nature, that could be animals, that could be studies, there could be their personal any opinion. It's just to kind of intervene and respectfully say that, respectfully, a, your opinion makes sense. B, your opinion makes sense as well. We understand where you both are coming from. Let's just kind of meet at a half point and just end this here, because it's reaching that point where you're hampering whatever big or little relationship you have due to this argument. So it's not worth it. So that could be an example of how we can try and sort out uh, anything without disrespecting other people. So yes, I think that would be that.
Great answer. Sometimes I agree with you. Sometimes it is important to find a common ground to resolve an issue like that. All right, excellent. Do you guys have any questions? Arif, Barira?
No, no. Nice.
Okay, it's
No,
not.
thank you.
All right, if it's not, then I would like to welcome our first guest, April, to say a few words, and you listen to our participants. Any advice and tips for them, please?
Okay, so thank you for having me again. I appreciate both perspectives. I guess respect is a huge thing that is lacking in today's society. And I just think it's like the big piece about self-awareness, because sometimes people, I've just been noticing in day to day that they lack that piece of self-awareness, which is they're not having respect for people around them, their peers, family, friends, and themselves. So when I think of just respect on a general basis, it's just like having like the acknowledgement about that, about having respect for time. Like a big thing for me is like when somebody says, I'm going to be at your place at 10 o'clock and they're not rolling up till 10:30 and I don't even get a message or a heads up. I'm playing stories in my mind thinking, oh my gosh, like, did they get in a car accident and did something happen? Like, so there's even that part. Now it's like that the disrespect has now put me into that mind frame of something's wrong. Whereas if a simple, having that piece of respect with just like a quick message, just the simplest things, the world could like move so much more smoothly. So just little things like that. And also a big thing for respect for me is just listening before speaking. And that's like for anybody in your day to day, because I feel so many people are just so quick to speak and respond without listening. So respect goes on so many different layers in our life with yourself and, like I said, others, everyone around you. You know, like how much tolerance do we have, right? So I would say just be kind, be courteous, be aware of others, treat others as you'd like to be treated yourself. Yeah, so that's kind of just like my little hints and things that I've thought about in the last like couple of days, because I know I've spoke on this topic before and I didn't want to repeat myself. So I was just thinking more about just how we as a whole and as individuals, how we present ourselves in public, and even with ourselves, the whole self-respect thing too. So
Yeah.
thank you guys. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, April. Now I'd like to welcome Trevor. Share your thoughts, please.
Respect has a lot of different ethics. The way I view respect is there what you encounter on the professional side, what you encounter personal friends, family. And the professional side is a dynamic of relationship, a public role, and many other things. In each side, you always have to separate the role from the question of the profession. What's their role? What's their task? And whether they're likable. Because I do know people tend to mix likability with respect. There's two different things. From my perspective, as being a manager and having staff, I always look at what their skills are. What are they serving for the purpose of a project or an initiative day-to-day? I have had experts on some of my projects, and their personalities before. That takes a sidebar conversation so you can understand that they need to either come back or stay on point with what they're doing. Even though some of their body language is not good, that you don't know how to control it language. Though you can respect their knowledge that they bring to the table. And I've had to do this a few times with getting people to control and to communication that they're doing it, both written and written. Now, from that, many times when you do that, it calms the situation down within the whole group. And from that, you can actually start having the results of people respecting each other around the table based on their knowledge. Exactly what April was saying, like interrupting everybody. And that's just a habit that sometimes people find, and then they do it on the content. The other component that pops out of it is once you've navigated the strengths and weaknesses of the person, then you can start getting into the other layer of conversation, which is people's time is valuable. Other people, there's a saying out there, if you're not 15 minutes early, you're late. Or being on time, you're 15. And because that's respecting everyone's time and effort that comes into play. For instance, when you have back-to-back-to-back meetings, because Outlook just gives you from 9 till 10 and until 11, so people just sort of blame. I've usually built into my meeting, the meetings are only going to be 45 minutes. Why? Because I learned something from K to 12 in university. It takes 10 minutes to get from one location to the other. And whatever creates that 10 minutes. Sometimes it's setting up Zoom, sometimes physically walking. So I respected other people's time by consciously knowing I should cut any meeting off at the 45, 50 minute mark to give the other people time to come into their meeting that was afterwards. So you're respecting not only your time and how you're managing your situation, but the next way forward. I acknowledge that sometimes meetings lead over because conversations are important, or the detail they're bringing up is important. And that's where you have to sometimes navigate on a moment to moment decision. Oh, is being late for the next person more or less respectful than dealing with this important topic, or the topic that was just brought up at the last minute? Or whether you even need to be there because the conversation is really around 3 or 4 other people. It doesn't really. So knowing that respectfulness in a professional environment sometimes revolves just being a little bit assertive, saying, sorry, I have to cut off now, or I have a hard cut or a hard end at a certain time. But being upfront about that, even at the beginning of the meeting, is really useful. I will echo a comment that April said, which is when people set up a meeting and they don't have an agenda. I don't even know if I should be there. So, because oftentimes I'm double booked. So I am trying to navigate my time of what's important. And the agenda doesn't need to be perfect, just oftentimes 3 or 4 points. But this is what we're talking about. My favorite example was from a vice president who took over. I learned a lot of interesting techniques. So when he took over on our organization, he had all the executives in the room. And his very first meeting, it was a planning. And one of our directors or executives made the mistake of starting to talk about what their project had been doing for the last month. In other words, providing a number. And the retort that he provided was, this is a planning meeting. I want to know what you're doing in the upcoming month. I can read project summaries, I can read briefing notes, and I can read decks. That's what and the minutes from the previous meeting. So I know where you're at. So then he had to sort of do the assertive thing on the other side and say, this is a planning meeting. Anybody comes in here talking about what they did last month, that provides zero value to this, other than if that task was not accomplished. I need to know what my future risks are, my future timelines are, and my future costs. And he said that another 2 or 3 times. And then the 2 or 3 executives who did not listen to that soundbite over the last 3 or 6, when they started off providing a summary of what they did last time, he just said, just please leave the meeting. This is a planning. This is not an audit meeting. So there are things in which it annoyed a lot of people because he was changing what was happening in the structure of the meeting. But he was also giving that soundbite time of, this is what his expectation. And on the personal front, I agree everything that Rick made a comment on earlier. It's like that. Friends are very different things, especially with confidential information. I think that's always the biggest thing when people are sharing things and having the judgment of knowing what is personal information that probably shouldn't be broadcast. And I know the LGBTQ community, just because they may come out to me doesn't mean they come out to everybody else. So I never feel it's my job to out them without their knowledge. Because it's their information. And I come from an era in which if you felt that community very specifically, they'd be beat up. They'd be fired. So there's like, just because your information known doesn't mean it's your responsibility to share it. And that's a respect thing.
Excellent. Thank you, Trevor. Anything else? Do you guys have any questions for Trevor or April?
I just have a nice takeaway that we all have a different idea of respect, and it kind of encompasses in professional and personal. And I like one of the quotes April just said, that if you should deal with, I'm paraphrasing now, but it was something that don't do something that you wouldn't like to be done to yourself? Or April, if you don't mind repeating that, that was really helpful.
Yeah, so treat others as you expect to be treated yourself. That's kind of been ingrained and instilled in me probably over 40, well, like 40 years. It's just something that I remember, like when you're a little kid. Well, don't do that, because would you like it to happen to you? It's just, when you break it down, it's very simple. It's like sometimes when we speak or act and do things to other people, you kind of take a step back and be like, oh my gosh, like would I want somebody to talk to me or treat me that way? So that's kind of just something that is always stuck with me. So yeah.
Thanks.
Excellent. Anything else? Any other question?
No, we're good.
All right.
No, thank you.
So we have come to the end of our podcast. I'd like to thank our participants, Arif and Barira. Thank you for taking your time to join this podcast. And I also like to thank our guests, Trevor and April, for joining us today. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Before we wrap up, I would like to remind our listeners that there are several resources available to help individuals dealing with bullying. The Government of Alberta has a bullying helpline, and which provides support and advice to those who are experiencing bullying. The helpline can be reached at 1-888-456-2323. Bullying is a violation of human rights. Under no circumstances is bullying acceptable. Thank you for joining in conversation with MANWAR Khan, and see you next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Nice meeting you all.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.